All right, there we go. Welcome everybody to the All Elite Zone Talking Elite episode 10.
Ooh.
So yeah, woo. Tonight is going to be the first of many episodes. We're going to do a wrestler spotlight starting today. We're going to do it every second Tuesday of the month. So we'll do a different star each month. We'll discuss some of our favorite moments of the wrestler. We'll also be discussing promos, how they got their start. It's gonna, like I said, so it's gonna be a really good show. But before we get into the swing of things, let me introduce you to my tag team partner. He is the Bubba to my Devon. He
Oh,
is everybody's favorite bearded wonder. Adam, thanks for joining us tonight, man.
hey, no, thank you, Lane. This is actually going to be my first broadcast with you guys from my new apartment, so
Yeah. So
it's
congrats on the new
It's an
apartment.
interesting setup.
So hopefully when I come down to Florida, I know it's gonna be a little late for a housewarming party, but hopefully when I visit Florida, we'll have a housewarming party for you.
Well, not just that, but maybe we can do like a live, like from my apartment.
Right? Yes, totally. So just before we get started, Connor is unfortunately not going to be joining us tonight. He had some internet trouble outside of his control. He had somebody with a car run into a pole, and now his whole neighborhood internet is down. So Connor will be in the chat tonight as well. So he'll be talking with us virtually through the chat. So he'll still be part of the show. He just won't be on screen. So yeah, hopefully, like I said, hopefully Connor, hopefully next week or hopefully by tomorrow you'll get everything fixed. Because yeah, like that sucks. It's like out of your control, man.
Yeah, no, definitely wish Connor was on tonight. He told me that before we came on tonight that he's like, hey, I won't be on. Internet's down because of a car. I said, oh, well, all right, Lane and I got it.
Yeah, so yeah, man, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be a good show. Ethan already shown love to
What's
everybody's
up,
favorite
Ethan?
Adam. Thanks so much,
Hello,
Ethan.
hello.
So yeah, did you have a chance to watch last night's Dynamite?
I have no internet. So I've been
Oh,
watching
gotcha.
clips. Been watching clips of it, watching highlights of it. Saw some good highlights of it. I hate to tell you guys I told you so,
I was
but
about to
man,
say you told us
that
right.
I'm telling you, the guns, man. I'm thinking it might be like just a quick transition
Yeah.
because I feel like the Acclaim are going to win them back at Revolution.
Well, the thing is, who knows? Because they put out a very snarky picture with Dax Hardwood's favorite tequila. Did you see that post after they won?
I think I missed that post,
Okay, I'll
but
yeah,
hey,
I'll share it with you later.
maybe you get a triple threat at Revolution of the Acclaim versus the Guns versus FTR,
Which would be awesome.
which would be a good triple threat.
Yeah, it was a very shock. Like I was like not expecting it to happen on random Dynamite of all places. I was thinking
Well,
it'd be
also a lot of
Revolution, but
people. I mean, a lot of people were also expecting the Billy Gunn heel turn,
yeah.
but they swerved that and were like, nope.
Yep. Jason Miller also says that he hates to admit it, but Adam to predict it all along. 2023 of the Guns year. So, it's one of those things that, man, it was just such a. I thought last night's Dynamite, compared to what some of the critics have said, and some other journalists like yourselves have said, but I really enjoyed last night's. Like, I liked the shock value um, of the Guns winning. Like, just listening to that crowd, like, the air was just sucked out. Like, it's been a while I think since we had a reaction like that specifically.
Well, I think it's also the big thing was, I mean, a lot of people complain. They're like, wow, and the crowd goes mild and completely quiet. Well, yeah, that was the plan all along. They're a heel team. They're supposed to make you go, what the hell just happened? So people complaining that's like that there's no reaction and everything like that. I was like, no, that's exactly the reaction the heels wanted you to get.
Yeah, like it was a perfect like heel surprise moment. Of course, like I said, it wasn't gonna be like when Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus won it, or when the Lucha Bros won the titles. Like it was a complete shock. And I will give Tony Khan credit with this. And I know we had a discussion a little bit last night about this, and kind of we had some disagreements on the show last night about it. But I really liked the call, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I know a lot of people are upset because there's potentially going to be a rematch at Revolution, and it looks like right now there's three? I believe there's like three rematches scheduled for Revolution, and a lot of people are not liking that aspect. What is your take on having like three rematches on that card potentially?
Well, what are we looking at? We are looking at a rematch possibly of the Guns and the Acclaimed.
Guns and the Acclaimed.
We're looking at Wardlow and Samoa Joe for the TNT title. And then a possible rematch of Jamie Hayter.
It could be, yeah. That's another rumor I've seen around where it's Jamie Hayter.
That's the rumor. Could be Jamie Hayter and what's her name?
Tony Storm.
Tony Storm. Thank you.
And then also Jericho and
Ricky Starks.
So they're
which is a match I'm really looking forward to. That's almost like going to be like a generational, like passing of the torch kind of match. I think from Jericho down to Ricky Starks. But my take on the rematches, if they're done right, then I have no problem with it. If the matches go, very cleanly, smoothly, and all the wrestlers put on the best they can and actually get the crowd involved in their matches, then hats off to them. The one I am hesitant about, even though they always have a banger, is Tony Storm and Jimmy Hayter. I'd like to see that as a triple threat. Yeah. Jamie Hayter against Tony Storm versus Shida. Because Shida's kind of like on the outside looking in of everything. So I'd like to see that happen. But I got a feeling if it's a rumor, probably the one thing we're going to get is Ruby Soho, Jamie Hayter, and Britt Baker versus Tony Storm, Saraya, and maybe a surprise partner. I don't know who, but they could pull a swerve and Ruby Soho turns on Britt Baker and them and joins them. It's
one of those things that anything can happen. Especially like I said, and like last night we were talking about the storylines going into Revolution, and kind of not. I don't know if it's been put on ice or if it's just kind of like how they do with Hangman and Kenny Omega, where they're planting seeds early on, like in the Elite versus Kenny Omega, versus Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, kind of the inner turmoil. So who knows what could happen? And then, like I said, so that could be a possibility. Of course, we have MJF versus Bryan Danielson, that 1 hour Iron Man match. And after last night, very controversial promo. But before we get into the promo, did you see clips of Takeshita and MJF last night?
I did. And MJF was very impressive in the ring with Takeshita. I honestly thought they had great ring chemistry. And MJF looks in great shape. Probably some of the best shape I've seen him in the past years in AEW. Because you can see abs on that guy now. So it's like he's in great ring shape. So
I've been watching a lot of his gym stuff because he's been posting a lot of workouts in the gym, and he's increased like his protein intake. He's increased his muscle mass. Like he is, like I said, this is gonna be one of the best matches I believe of his career.
I agree. Yeah, no, with him and with Bryan Danielson. Yeah, I honestly think they're both going to be putting on a clinic, really. MJF's going to play that whole heel, going against the ropes all the time, circling around the ring, trying to keep away from Bryan, extend it, and everything like that, extend that hour. But I think it's going to be a hard-hitting match like he had with Ricky Starks.
Yeah. And looking at like he was really working over almost using Takeshita as like an example. This is something that I kind of thought about today while I was at work, but he was basically targeting the same shoulder and arm of Takeshita that was causing Bryan Danielson issues.
Yeah. No, I think honestly think that was I want to say it's kind of like his plan of look what I can do to Kesher's arm. This is what I'm going to do to you. It's kind of like the mind games that MJF was playing with Daniel Bryan, knowing which arm Daniel Bryan Bryan Daniel.
Good. We all know he made.
Yeah. Yes. Danielson. He's playing that mind games with Danielson, and I think it's smart. I mean, it's the heel plan. It's the heel go. You know, it's basically his forte. He's like, look, this is Takeshi's arm. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to your arm at Revolution. So,
yeah, it was one of those things that, like, it was a very well put together match, and even though Takeshita lost, I still think MJF put over Takeshita last night. Like I said, he looked like, I think Takeshita in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll be talking like we were talking about MJF when when we first saw word of him, getting signed by AEW, and those first couple big moments he had with the company. Looking at it that way, and then leading into he hits Takeshita with that beautiful diamond ring. And like that was just a cool shot, especially later in the episode where he had the bandage over it because it looked like a nasty welt. So I don't know if it was a real hit, and God bless Takeshita for taking that hit if it was a real hit, or whoever is doing their makeup and effects and working, and making it look pretty presentable. That hit looked nasty.
Yeah, no, I want to say Takeshi maybe leaned into it a little bit. I think it's right spots with. I know they hate the term, but blading. I mean, it was a good spot for the blading and for the blood. I mean, it's the post match beatdown of a heel on a face. And I honestly think that Takeshi was over regardless of that match with MJF.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, the crowd loves Takeshi. He's put on a lot of good matches. Whether it was on Dark or Elevation or even on Dynamite or Rampage, he puts on a great match. I mean, that's just Takeshi. And I agree with you. I think the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be talking about him. I honestly think Takeshi can win an All-Atlantic title with an AEW. So,
yeah. Like, so there's some big things to come. Mike Morris, and kind of leading into before we start going into a deep dive, he brought up a very good point. Last night, Mike felt that they made a lot of progress in the MJF and Danielson feud. It's getting more heated, and that's a good thing. I agree with you, Mike, on that. I always thought, I knew it was going to be a great feud, but last night, it just, every little thing, just hit on every check mark. There was maybe one little thing I wouldn't have done personally, but other than that, I thought it was a really great match. And then my favorite promo that he's cut, a very Ric Flair-esque promo where he did a certain gesture that I'm surprised he got through on TV. In a long term, he basically stated that he had a girlfriend in the car. They were having teenage fun on prom night, and he got the car wrapped around a telephone pole. And then he switched places with said girl. He still checked, make sure she was breathing, which is good. I'm glad. He's not the complete.
He's not that big of a guy. No, he's
but just that was just such a. I thought it was a very risky promo, and it was so good. Going back to Jason's comment, that's why I saved it for this. Okay, oops, where to go? Here we go. They had over 300 police calls were made after MJF cut that promo.
I read that. So
he did his job
that's
well.
Hilarious. That says that, it says that's a job well done. That that a wrestler can tell a story like that, whether it's true or not, to blur the lines between reality and fantasy storytelling in professional wrestling. And the fact that 300 people called and were like, can we get this investigated? Because this might be true. But then again, how many people in that town, how many people would it's all the people that don't like MJF. All 300 calls were people who don't like MJF. Might have been his own parents, too. His own parents might have called.
It makes it more believable, right?
Yeah, it's more believable. But that's just good storytelling. And the fact that it's it made a news headline like that police were called because a possible fictional story was told on professional wrestling television, and people ate up with it. So I think it's a masterful stroke by MJF.
Dude, like, he is one of the ones that really does keep kayfabe still alive. I know a lot of wrestlers don't like fans saying that, but looking at it, he really plays that character. Like, he really doesn't turn that switch off. Mike has a good comment. I want to see what have you weigh in, because I actually don't recall this. He states that this is the kind of heat that the NWO got when they destroyed Rey Mysterio.
Yeah. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. It was still during the WCW days, is when NWO basically ruled the airwaves of WCW. Because I don't know if it happened in WWE yet. I don't know if WWE had purchased WCW yet. And I believe I believe it was the heat that they got because they were in a very the demographic of the town they were in were very Latino, and I think they did something offensive. But also, I think they also ripped the mask off, which is a big no-no. It's a big no-no to rip a luchador's mask off like that.
Was that the first time that he had the mask ripped off, or was that after the?
No, but after that, he kind of had storylines where they, if he lost, he had to take his mask off, and that happened. But this was when he was still wearing the mask, and I believe the NWO ripped his mask off, or it's been so long since that I've seen something like that that I saw that storyline with NWO and Rey Mysterio. It's been 23 years since I watched VCW.
Yeah,
and that's when they went under, was 23 years ago. So I'm like, I can try to remember, but I don't remember.
Not trying to make you feel old, but I was 2 when that happened. So
I was 13, right? No, 12.
Yeah. So you were
13.
so you had a lot more wrestling experience than I did at that time frame.
12, yeah.
It's one of those things that it just makes me. I've gone back and I've watched a good amount of WCW, some of the matches, especially all the ones that you guys, the listeners, have recommended. And man, like, there's some great moments. And looking back now, like, nothing's ever, I guess, unique. Well, there's a lot of unique ways you can book things in AEW, WWE, but fortunately, there's a lot of ideas that's gonna be like, this worked then and it's gonna work now. Especially with heels like MJF, he's like I said, he grabs and knows how to play that role. Like, he's studied, Ric Flair, Bobby Heenan. Like, he's a very smart guy when it comes to his ring work and his ring psychology. Some fans are kind of, I don't want to necessarily compare him to Roman Reigns or a Brock Lesnar, but he knows how his time is valuable, and he's at least, he's showing up to work, whether it be a promo or some kind of tweet, at least, he's putting in the work. I guess that's the thing, is like, he's been I think he'll probably be one of my favorite champions as we go further into the company. Just looking at, all the passion he has, the hatred fans get, there was that story about the little girl where he put a very explicit thing on her popcorn bucket, signed it MJF, ate her popcorn, and then threw it at her. Like, you don't see much of that in professional wrestling.
No, and like you said, MJF's keeping kayfabe alive, and he understands the history and tradition of professional wrestling, and that's why he does it, because he respects it so much. Mm-hmm. You look at some of these videos from some of the conventions, he never breaks character. I remember one video I watched of him, and a guy in a wheelchair showed up and started talking trash to him. And MJF just went off on the guy, saying, well, at least I had the dignity to stand up and talk to you like a man. And like, knowing he's in a wheelchair, I'm like, oh my God, dude, this is so much heat. Like, this is great. He doesn't break character. Like, he's just the complete dick, like, heel, and it works. And honestly, I'm right there with you. He may be one of the best champions in professional wrestling going forward right now in this year. Because obviously, Will he ever lose the title this year? We don't know. We have yet to see it. I mean, we have yet to see if it's going to happen. I mean, but MJF is putting in that work. I mean, his tweets go out. He makes videos. He's doing interviews. He's going to professional sporting events. He goes to UFC. He goes to boxing. He goes to basketball games. He's all over the place, and he's basically the face of AEW right now, and he's playing with it so well. And I do see him as this generation's Ric Flair.
I agree with you on that statement. Like, I feel like it was a basically almost like a renaissance, I would say, when we started seeing more of MJF's character. I know for me, like, I didn't watch him in MLW, but I remember like he was being really like snarky and teasing that Cody heel turn on being the Elite before even AEW started. My first moment watching watching MJF, he was at Cody's house and they were having steaks, cigars, whiskey, just being a couple of good friends, right? And Cody had to step inside. He's like, "Hey, MJF, can you watch the steaks while you go inside to get some stuff?" And MJF was a complete jerk to Pharaoh. And this is where I'm like, okay, this guy gets it. Like he was being, you could tell like, things are starting to click and why, he was one of the first signings with AEW and what they potentially, saw in him, what we see now. He literally looks at Pharaoh, he grabs the stick, he's like, "You want this, boy?" And Pharaoh's like, "Yeah." "You want this, boy?" And he's like, "Yeah." He takes a big bite of it and then throws it into the trash. Just and then I think something happened. I think he hit Pharaoh or something like that, or hit because Pharaoh actually is a very well trained dog. But I think he hit Pharaoh or did something to him where Cody's like, "What got into Pharaoh?" So that was like my first taste with MJF was that first being the Elite that I watched with him. What about you? What was like your first like recallment of seeing MJF?
Well, believe it or not, my first time of seeing MJF was in AEW. When he was with Cody, and then he paired up with he paired up with a bunch of guys to take on Jericho and the Inner Circle.
Yeah, because it was what DDP.
I think it was the beginning. Yeah, it was like him, Cody, and like a bunch of other guys like teaming up to take on Jericho. That was like my first introduction of it, and I had to figure out. I was like, "Who is this guy?" So I went back and watched a lot of his MLW stuff, and man, was that was the build. That was the crust of the MJF character that we see now on television. It was just those building blocks in the MLW. He wasn't this suit wearing, going off on wrestling mark kind of guy. He was just the snarky dick who was just a great heel in MLW. I believe he still had the scarf, but I don't think he had the suits yet. He just had his scarf and just his wrestling trunks. That's all he had back in MLW. And what we're seeing now was basically the cornerstone of the MJF character. And, that whole story with him with Cody and then, them taking on the inner circle and then him turning on Cody. Like, it's just full circle of his character. And that was basically my introduction to him. And to see where he's at now, I'm just flabbergasted on how quickly he rose that quickly, and he was well deserved too. The man understands the business.
It was very organic, like his rise. Like, it was probably one of the most organic, besides probably Darby Allin in that company, or Hangman Adam Page. Like, it just just the crowd reaction. Like, everybody knew that he was going to turn on Cody eventually. Like, I think we all knew that was going to happen. And I remember that that promo that he cut where he was like, "Knock knock, Cody," and just going on like, how did you not see this coming? Everybody and their mom saw it coming, but you gave me too much trust. And just that tone. And then the whole tribulation where Cody had to face Wardlow in a steel cage. That was the first steel cage match in AEW history. And having Cody moonsault off the top. I loved how, everything just felt like it was intertwined with how great, both Cody and MJF's directions have gone, even though Cody's no longer with AEW. But those two right there are the staples of professional wrestling and still on top. And to have really that being like the biggest, hottest feud to really start off your company, that really says a lot about how much trust Cody has in MJF and, a Wardlow. Because think about it, I didn't really know who Wardlow was. All I know is I saw him doing, a vignette of him just benching like heavy weight. And I'm like, who is this guy? And then to have him line up, with MJF, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that was probably one of the best storylines. And then to have those 10 lashings with the belts. I have never been so passionate, and like there's been a couple times I've cried during matches, but during a segment, just to see Cody's face and what little words that were said, and of course MJF just being a complete D-bag and just doing just crazy amounts of damage to that belt to his back. It really brought out kind of the character that we kind of see now, where he's not afraid to be the biggest salt of the earth, no pun intended with his finisher, but that was probably one of my favorite moments starting out with his career. What did you think about the whole Cody, that whole Cody feud?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but someone before that they basically took that idea. If you remember correctly, it was a feud in ECW. If you've ever watched old ECW stories, the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer feuded, and Tommy Dreamer had to take 10 whips from the cane from Sandman.
Yeah, I remember
and that was basically the story of where Tommy became a fan favorite in ECW because he took his lashes with the kendo stick, and he kept taking a beating, and he had the famous line of, thank you, sir, may I have another? And he just goes against the ropes and he takes another one from Sandman. So basically that's what AEW did with the lashes with Cody Rhodes. Basically that whole story, that story basically was a stepladder and trajectory for both of them. We would have thought, hey, Cody's going to stick with AEW, and once he's finally done within the ring, he's going to go backstage and be like, look, we got to push MJF. But then Cody leaves. Yeah. But now he's on the trajectory in the other company to possibly win a championship this year. So by the end of the year, we're going to have the two guys with the most compelling storytelling in AEW be champions in two separate promotions. But it's also generational gap too. Because you got to remember, Cody, if I remember correctly, MJF doesn't have any lineage in professional wrestling. He has no family that's never done wrestling.
He literally started wrestling.
He's literally the first generation. He's literally first generation.
Yeah.
Whereas Cody is second generation. And like it's crazy. Like you look at it, you're like, holy crap! You got a second generational wrestler who's going to be a champion in one promotion, and he had a match with this first generational professional wrestler in this, and they're both going to be champions at the end of the year. That's that respect and that bridge that both of them have built together. And it was Cody's. I'm going to say it, Cody's call to be like MJF. And I think it finally took Tony Khan and the rest of AEW to go, yeah, MJF is the guy. Like MJF is the guy. He's a worker. He's gonna show up to work. He's gonna promote this company. I just said it. He's at UFC matches. He's at NBA games. He's on, interviews on sports channels. Like he's doing it all. And he's on social media. The respect that this guy gets too. And I don't know if we're going to talk about it. I might be jumping ahead. But the tweets he put out about his buddy, I keep forgetting Nash, and basically saying this guy is not a bad guy.
Yeah.
He goes, I roomed with him. He goes, I'm Jewish. This guy's not anti-Semitic. That's the respect that he's got in this company or in this industry, and he understands that. And we'll agree, like it's the same thing we talked about with Jay Briscoe. Some dumb shit happened in the past. He apologized. He said it was stupid, and people, some higher ups in certain corporations shunned him. It's the same thing going on with Nash. It's because situation happened, and Nash got in trouble, and now he's blacklisted from like professional wrestling. But then there's people like MJF who will put his neck out. Someone who's a champion of a promotion put his neck out for someone who's in deep water within the industry, and say, "Listen, I'm a champion of a promotion, but I can tell you straight up, this guy is not an issue." So I mean, that's just, and I think he's learned that from Cody, because Cody's been around the business for so long. I mean, even as a kid, I guarantee you, as a kid, going around with his dad, hanging out with his brother, doing all this stuff. They've been in the industry for a long, long time, the Rhodes family, And so I think MJF has learned a lot of that under Cody, about understanding about who your friends are in this industry, who can you speak up for in this industry, who can you guide and make better, not only as a professional wrestler, but as a person in this industry, because that's all it is image. Mm-hmm. Image is a big thing in anything, and image is a big thing in professional wrestling. And I think a lot of people don't realize that some of these people are human and they have a life outside of professional wrestling. So, but I mean, that's just my take on it, about how the story between Cody and MJF, that feud, basically is where we're at now, trajectory wise, of where both of those guys are now, and how MJF is now the face of a company that Cody founded.
And it's crazy, like, just to go, like I said, looking at that now, to see, you have, the biggest moment of last year with MJF winning that title, and then now you have Cody this year, potentially, like I said, winning the, the big one at WrestleMania. Just watching like those two dudes' careers, like, MJF even said it best. Like, Cody was his mentor, but MJF had to step out of that shadow. It was probably one of my favorite. Like I said, it's probably still my favorite MJF feuds of all time. Ethan, he brings up a good point, and we'll talk about Moxley here in a second. But when literally your three best feuds, CM Punk, one of the biggest superstars in the industry, period. Has that, John Cena, The Rock, that kind of, and Hogan appeal, to his character. Of course, John Moxley, looking at, that feud where, we thought he was going to win that championship with all the stipulations that he was putting in, and we thought he was going to be the one to dethrone Mox. And then, of course, Cody, he had probably, really two of his, first big feuds were pretty, early in AEW. The guy has gone around, and to the point where Jim Cornette does not like AEW. He does.
Well, we knew that. We knew that.
But when Jim Cornette even mentions or praises, an AEW moment, you've done the job right. Mm-hmm. The Coug, thanks for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you, my friend. He thought it was cool. MJF was brought in as Cody's friend, and then those lashes and Cody's was the best segment. Yeah, I would say that's probably my top 3 moments of AEW that's not wrestling matches. Just because the emotion tied with that. And then we get John Moxley and MJF. What do you remember about this feud? Do you remember? Any of the promos?
That was. Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember some of my favorite moments from that. Honestly, I think some of my favorite stuff with that feud is anything that MJF brings in about Regal. Just because Moxley had so much respect for Regal, because Regal is one of the people that kind of looked after Moxley, kind of brought him up in professional wrestling, and was his guide through everything. And so anytime MJF just went after Regal, there's Moxley just standing up for Regal. I think one of the best promos MJF had in that feud wasn't even with Moxley, it was with Regal. I think that promo itself, where he just attacks Regal's history of alcohol and drug abuse, and I mean, he gets into the deep stuff, you know. And then finally the payoff of, you know, Regal helping MJF win and then turning on Regal. Like, it just almost like, I honestly think like this persona of MJF, the devil incarnate um, character that he says that he's the devil himself. I think this is some of his best work right now in this persona. It's almost like we've talked about like last week when we talked about the families and we talked about Randy Orton, his evolution from, you know, in evolution, then he's the legend killer, then he's the Viper. You know, it's almost like this is what MJF's doing. MJF comes in as Cody's friend slash now enemy. Then he's building himself up to the salt of the earth, the best in the world. And now he's the devil incarnate himself. Yes. And so I think this is some of the best work we're going to see MJF do. And honestly, that Moxley feud between him and Moxley and Regal, and even, you know, it kind of transitions in with his feud now with Danielson. You know, because that's still an extension storytelling of Blackpool Combat Club. You know, it's still the one circle. And so, I mean, Moxley is a fighter. MJF was the runner and the mouth talker. You know, he, with that feud, you know, and it was crazy because that story, in all honesty, it should have been MJF and Punk. I mean, that story, like, I don't think it was meant to be what Moxley and MJF was doing, but they turned it around the best they could. And that goes to show, too, because, you know, talk is Moxley is a good backstage, you know, locker room leader, you know, and he feels that MJF might be the perfect fit right now to hold the title, you know. And so I honestly thought that wasn't a rushed feud. I honestly thought it was good storytelling, especially involving Regal, you know. So I think that's just my take on that.
And I think they made, you know, basically a great feud out of a bad situation. Not going into too much details because we've discussed it quite a bit on the show, but the whole with the whole CM Punk and, you know, the Elite issues that they had backstage, like, it kind of overshadowed a little bit of MJF's, you know, ladder match win. And to have, I feel like they fixed the issue now. You know, fans may not agree or the ratings may not agree, but I feel like they fixed the issue with, you know, that feud with MJF. And what was also great about it, too, was they called it back to their first, you know, championship feud when Moxley was champion during the pandemic era. You know, I thought they had a lot of good callbacks to that. And then you, of course, had the whole, you know, you had the William Regal, you know, when William basically turned on Mox for like a split second to teach them that one last lesson. And then have, you know, MJF, you know, go for the win and just a surprise shock to Moxley. That was very crisp storytelling. Like, it was probably, I thought it was probably, you know, of course with CM Punk, it probably, like, CM Punk story would have been good too. But man, you could not write a better finish for William Regal to leave AEW, and then, you know, the Blackpool Combat Club and where they're at now. Like, I think they did a really good job at capping off MJF and Moxley's story.
Yep, I agree. And honestly, after this whole feud with Hangman, if it is truly over, if not, I do think Moxley deserves a little bit of a break.
Yeah, he needs a vacation.
Yeah.
Sasha Owens, thank you for joining us. She mentions that Cody versus MJF was really good for when AEW first started. Yeah, that was, like I said, that was probably one of my favorite. Like I said, it's still probably one of my favorite feuds, besides the next one I want to talk about, the dog collar match with CM Punk, and you know, that whole series of, you know, moments and matches. That one I thought just stole the show, basically spotlight on Cody and Brody's dog collar match. What did you, like, going back, what did you think of the presentation of when you knew CM Punk and MJF were going to have a huge blow-off match? But what did you think about when with Punk's presentation of doing that dog collar match? Like, what was your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, I was there live in Nashville.
You were live there?
Was there? I was there in person in the crowd when Punk was sitting in the ring. He started off the show with a box, and he had just gone through that series of matches to try to earn that match with MJF. And everybody's thinking, oh, the payoff match. It's a cage match. It's a lights out match. It's all this. Then he opens that box and he just pulls out that dog collar, and everybody went, oh God, because we were all familiar. If you're a true wrestling fan, you're familiar with the dog collar match. It goes way beyond Brody and Cody's match. It goes way beyond. It goes all the way back to ECW days. The Pitbulls had dog collar matches like crazy. So we were in awe when it was a dog collar match. And when MJF came out and didn't say a word, dropped the mic and walked off, a lot of us were like, wow, that presentation was amazing, because it kept MJF going, he's scared. You kept thinking that MJF is scared. But then MJF playing that turning, that little mind game with Punk, I honestly got emotions when MJF was telling his story on TV about being teased as a little Jewish boy. Like, that tore me up. I was like, holy cow. Because I'll be honest with you guys, I was teased as a kid. I was teased for being short and fat as a kid, so I understood the bullying part of it. So that kind of connected with me. I'm like, are we about to get a double turn here where Punk goes heel and MJF goes face? The storytelling there got me going. But then finally, MJF with the low blow and the ring to the head and the blood across the shirt of the picture of him and Punk. Holy cow. And the best part about that whole storytelling was his take on Punk's promo from Ring of Honor of, I'm a snake. the best trick the devil ever, like that whole thing, like the presentation of that whole feud. God, even goes back to the old 70s days too. I growing up, I was ECW, so that's what I was introduced to dog collar matches, was ECW, because the Pitbulls would always have them. But man, that storytelling between Punk and MJF, and there's a reason why that was a feud of the year in professional wrestling, because it was just so emotional. You got attached to it, and that payoff match. Not only did you get to see Punk win that payoff match, because everybody wanted to see Punk win and kick MJF's ass, but you also got to finally see the freedom and resurrection of Wardlow and his cut of ties from both MJF and the Pinnacle. So you got to see two, great stories just come full circle. So I would say that feud was basically the fire of 2021 for AEW. It's unfortunate that it ended the way that it did, because, honestly, Punk's a very passionate guy. He's not quiet. He's going to speak up about things. He's controversial. That's what made him a figure in professional wrestling. And he comes back and he's finally in a promotion, which I think where he would stride. And, unfortunately, injuries caught up to him, and then this backstage incident happened. But that whole feud with MJF and Punk, I guarantee that was some of the best storytelling I've seen in professional wrestling. And that includes the storyline that's going on in the other company with the bloodline. I will say that. And honestly, that's good storytelling. But man, that feud with MJF and Punk was such good storytelling.
It was literally all the little details that made that whole like storyline work, where it really had probably one of the best payoffs. I know we said a lot in the show, but it had one of the best payoffs.
And not to mention the throwback of Punk's Ring of Honor entrance at Revolution. Like I was like, wait a minute, and he came out in that gear. I was like, dude, that is his Ring of Honor gear. And I was thrown off, and I totally forgot that he came out to AFI in Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm. So Connor is in the chat. Welcome, Connor. Glad to have you on board. I'm sorry about your internet. Connor, that was, like I said, this doesn't surprise me because Connor is a very passionate CM Punk fan. He loved the feud with MJF and Punk. It was something special in AEW history, and then also developed Wardlow as the next big star.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I saw the comment he wrote below that it doesn't compare to the Bloodline, that's why I said it. I said that's why it's the best compelling storytelling. It is way above top tier to what the Bloodline storyline is. Just because the little tidbit drops here and there with Punk's past and MJF idolizing Punk and that whole story, it did touch something because MJF was a fan like us. We were fans, and then the fan became pissed at his favorite star, when he left, and they play on that story. So I honestly think that feud was above and beyond the best feud within the last, I would say, probably 5-10 years of professional wrestling.
So Connor has a actually question for us. So let me pull it up here. Sorry. Connor asked, what was your favorite match MJF put Punk through?
Wardlow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that Wardlow, because, again, that planted the seeds of seeing Wardlow as the next big star in AEW. And the fact that MJF just kept telling Wardlow, powerbomb him again, powerbomb, and you just see Wardlow go, dude, how many more times do you want me to do this? He's done. And it's funny because now that I look at that match of how Wardlow just had a look on his face like, dude, done. He's already punished. Brings me to, unfortunately, I watched it, was the Royal Rumble payoff with the Bloodline and Sami Zayn. They're beating the hell out of Kevin Owens, and then Sami steps in and goes, he's done, dude. He's done. He's below you. Move on. That's what I felt like happened with Wardlow against Punk, was that MJF was telling him, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Wardlow's like, dude, he's done. Just let me pin him. He's done.
Yes.
He's gonna be done. And then he loses. Punk rolls him up and pins Wardlow, and Wardlow goes, what the hell just happened? That match was really good. I mean, I enjoyed that match very much so. I mean, it was so much better and had more of a story to it than Punk versus Spears. Because Spears just got GTS and pinned quick.
Yeah.
It was quick. It was a squash.
Yeah, poor Spears. I feel like he deserves so much better in AEW.
Well, and he will. His time will come. And, right now he's just starting a family. You know what I mean? So, but I think Spears has a lot to more give. And that's another thing. When MJF brought Sean Spears on, part of his crew, I was ecstatic. I was like, because here's Spears. Spears is your hype guy behind MJF, his best friend. It's what you wanted Cody and MJF to be, but heelish now. The heelish type friendship now that you get with Spears and MJF. And I loved, the fact when the following week after MJF beat Punk in Chicago, they had that introduction of MJF, and it's Spears handing the notes to Justin Roberts. I loved it.
That was one thing that and we'll touch on the Pinnacle here in a second. But man, I loved the Pinnacle. I loved the whole Jericho feud, the Pinnacle feud, and I had a lot of fun with Blood and Guts with the Pinnacle. And looking at it now, that was probably one of the best. That was probably my favorite Blood and Guts match of the ones they've had.
Yeah, no, totally. Definitely agree that match and just that feud between the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle was just great.
Yeah. Connor, Connor is AEW fan, as y'all know. Connor put, that was so funny when Punk beat Spears in 7 seconds. He was so hyped for that match and made a graphic for Punk and Spears. So
yeah.
That was one thing too that I guess that's one thing. The Coug, like he just stated, Tony Khan is a magnificent madman. The guy eats and breathes wrestling history nonstop as a true fan. And I think that's something that I think fans forget because they're used to the whole, Vince McMahon, Triple H, where they're professional. They'll put their arm around their stars, but they won't hug or show as much passion as Tony Khan does. And I think fans forget Tony Khan is he's a huge wrestling fan. And like I said, I would be doing the same thing that he would be doing, besides some of the the overflation of the roster. But I'd be so passionate about my talent and love my talent.
And that's what a promoter needs to be. They need to be passionate about their talent, because they look at it and they're like, I have a roster, again, quoted a oversized roster of great talent here. And I'm very happy I have them and the product I can put out. There's a reason why I believe Tony Khan's won Promoter of the Year twice now, right? Correct?
Yeah, twice.
He's won it twice now.
I think he did win it last year as well, because I don't think they counted Triple H.
No, they didn't. So yes, he did win it last year. Although I think they were talking about another. There's been so many different pro wrestling things where they've said Promoter of the Year. Yeah. In all honesty, if you ask people, Tony Khan has been Promoter of the Year two years now, and there's a reason for it. It's because he's doing excellent storytelling. Yeah. A lot of things you see in other promotions, especially the other big one, it's just distracts, and the products is just not as strong as it should be or what it used to be. And I agree with Cog is, man, Tony Khan understands the history and the tradition of professional wrestling. I mean, that's why I say I think Tony Khan sees MJF as the new generational Ric Flair. He sees something in the kid. He's like, I actually am happy that this kid's in my promotion. I mean, God knows what would happen if I lose this kid, which is why I do believe he signs him at 2024. I honestly think MJF stays at AEW. I think he's got it too good there. I mean, he's up top. If he goes over to the other company, he's lost in the shuffle.
He would basically be like the Miz. Like, he can't get away with doing my next big talking point, because we can't, not talk about this. The whole MJF pipe bomb in front of the executives when he called Tony a mark. And that was, a lot of it was real. Tony knew how pissed off MJF was at his position, especially after the big surprise, the pay-per-view, that Sunday before, where Wardlow squashed him, where he missed the appearance, almost didn't show up. Tony's like, fine, show up, I'll pay you what you want, but like I said, but you're getting squashed, or however that happened, because MJF, you don't really know if he's 100%, but when he went on a couple of the sports shows talking about that, it literally was one of those great, real promos, especially when you had your executives, literally in attendance that night. That really showed, one, how much trust Tony has for MJF, and two, that was one of the most, I still think it's the most talked about, I guess, promo / controversial things have happened in AEW. And especially when they sent CM Punk, out there after they cut his mic.
No, and I agree. I think, but again, controversial sells anything. You look at a lot of things. You look at old talk shows. You look at old, Jerry Springer. You look at, old episodes of. There was an old TV host back in the day, a very angry, smoking New York conservative guy named Morton Downey Jr. had a talk show back in the 90s, and he was very controversial. He brought on a lot of crazy topics. I mean, but it sold, and then you look at stuff like the pipe bomb. I mean, the first pipe bomb, obviously, you looked was CM Punk. And that was what, MJF wanted. He wanted his own pipe bomb. Now, to say that maybe some of it was true and some of it was just, I mean, because you have to think he couldn't say most of that stuff if it wasn't most of it wasn't approved, because no one was gonna. I mean, there's a lot of freedom in AEW, but there's still a little bit of a tightrope on what you can and cannot say on television, but also just in general on and so you got to look at the blurred lines on that. If most of what MJF was saying was true, yes, it was true at the point that the company was bringing in a lot of ex WWE guys. Yes, it's true that MJF might have been lost in the shuffle there, and is it true he's got some talent? Yeah, but I mean, honestly, is Tony Khan a mark? I don't think so. He's just a big fan, and he just wants to make a great promotion, and he just knows on a card where to put people. Yeah. Now, whether some talent get lost in that, it's unfortunate. But then again, that's why Tony Khan is just a genius when he says, "Listen," he goes, "We only got this on TVs Wednesdays and Fridays. Guess where else we can promote this crap? Online." And that's why he comes up with Dark and Elevation and do these on YouTube. Think about it that way, is he's doing those on YouTube and he's showing them for free.
Yeah.
You don't even need a YouTube subscription. You don't need an account. You can watch them for free. He's losing money on that, but he's still making money with everything on Dynamite and, with Rampage, and also obviously his dad being the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah. Well, even then, he's a very smart guy, because we should do a whole podcast on Tony Khan. But looking at, even though we may not have as big of ratings as a lot of people thought they would have, but if you look at it, he's still getting very lucrative deals from Universal and Warner Brothers. When they had that merger, he still apparently, rumor has it, he had a really big lucrative deal that they're going to announce here very shortly. So that says something right there. I don't think Tony Khan's a mark. If anyone's a mark, it would be the fans that don't even watch the product, or the ones that run Botchamania, and the ones that run the Ringside News, those kind of pages where they just stir up what they think about pro wrestling when it's not. And that's why we'll move on to our next MJF moment, but that's why I think CM Punk will be coming back to AEW. I think they're doing the same path they did with MJF. Because think about it, MJF went silent. No merch. The reason I got a figure in that time frame was because they were already in production. But think about it, they stopped his merch. They didn't show him on the website. So it's so crazy to see, everything that could happen, and then having that seed planted to where, CM Punk can come back, and you can have a great feud with MJF, because CM Punk, if he loses to MJF, he's not going to lose any credibility.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Before we move on, we're going to go in the comment section here real quick. Let's see. And then I'll pull up Connor's, actually our next talking point here in a second. The Coog mentioned not just wrestling history, but also Mexican, lucha, and Japanese. I can't pronounce that word.
Puriseo? I don't know.
I don't know that. Yeah. No other promoter in the U.S. does that. So, like I said, I would love to meet Tony Khan. I would love to even just pick his brain on just because think about it, he's only 3 years into booking AEW at this point in time, recording. So he's still getting his feet wet and understanding what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it'll be like an Impact situation where, fortunately you just get small and smaller to where you're basically you're basically a independent show that's doing TV tapings. I don't think that'll ever happen with AEW and Tony Khan, because I think there's still a really good dedicated fan base.
Not just that, but there's also too much money within AEW.
Yeah. So I asked a question in the comment section. Let's see. I asked who was the better pipe bomb, CM Punk or MJF, and the coup responded back. This is actually a really interesting point. So the coup put it's a tough one for him to answer. Like I agree, like it'd be hard to sit down because when I started watching wrestling, it was that time frame. Okay, yeah. So basically, it was that time frame when CM Punk was like when he was gearing up to be the next world champion in the summer of Punk. So yeah, like that yeah, that's hard because they're both so very controversial.
Yeah.
But the people let's see, he put Eileen Punk because what you said about the McMahon still holds true today, which it does. Especially if they sell to Saudi and Vince is back in 100% control.
Yeah. See, I agree with that because of what Punk said in the pipe in 2011, where he said, this company might be better off when Vince dies, but then his idiot son-in-law and dumb daughter were going to take over for it. Well,
which they did
you're
for a
kind
brief
of seeing
time.
it. You did for a while, and it was, I guess, it was doing okay, but it was still not great. And now you got McMahon coming back and a possible sell of the company, which is kind of coming to fruition of what Punk said in that pipe bomb. Because he said, if Vince McMahon dies, or if Triple H and Stephanie take it over, technically Triple H is only in charge of talent stuff and day-to-day, like the creative. He's not technically in charge of the company. That's still Nick Khan. Nick Khan is sole CEO of WWE. So basically, Punk's fruition is sort of coming true, but I kind of lean towards MJF, just because of how much passion he had in that promo. Because he was kind of speaking from his heart. With Punk, it just felt like he was just airing out his grievances just on air, and it was just a big pipe bomb. No, granted, it was a great pipe bomb.
Yeah.
It was probably probably one of the most legendary ones, if not the one. But when MJF came out calling TK and Mark and talking about ex-WWE guys and about how he's getting shuffled around and knocked down and he's got talent. And I can't remember if he's mentioned any other talent in the back, but I mean, he was speaking. I feel like MJF was speaking on behalf of a lot of the young guys in the back saying, where's our TV time? Where's our stuff?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was great storytelling because they did bring Punk out. And I believe that was going to carry on to what we saw at Revolution, or not Revolution. Was that All Out?
Yeah, All Out, yeah.
Yeah, when All Out, happened and he came back. That was going to be the payoff. That was going to be the continuation of their story. And then obviously that backstage stuff happened. And, I'm sure a lot of people were like, well, we want to see the conclusion of this storyline of Punk and MJF. And honestly, that goes back to my point of it was supposed to be Punk and MJF and filling in for that Moxley MJF feud. It was supposed to be the continuation of that. But do we see it where Punk comes back, goes straight into the title picture again? Or do we see it take the storyline of Punk coming back, teaming with two other guys and taking on the Elite? I mean, you got to look at it that way. Which story is going to be the biggest seller for your company?
I don't think it'll be right away. I think it has to be the Elite right away. But I think, like I said, it could be like a good middle or towards the end of the year feud, like one last big cap to end, end off the year with MJF going. I would say just have him go straight through as world champion and have Punk be, have him beat Punk to get that almost revenge in a way, but that all that full circle moment come back around.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then now we're gonna get to one of the things I think they could have done better in AEW history, but I thought it was still a great time frame. The promo that MJF, Connor loved the promo that MJF cut. Introduced the Pinnacle at St. Patrick's Day Slam. Oh man, that was like I love the Pinnacle, and I thought literally they were going to be that faction that was going to last, almost like the Horsemen. I really thought they were going to last a lot longer, but it kind of fell apart a little bit after Blood and Guts, and also after Stadium Stampede. What was your thoughts with the Pinnacle and that whole Jericho versus
MJF story? I loved it. I loved that he brought on FTR and Sean Spears. On that, obviously, we knew Wardlow was already part of it, being his like right-hand bodyguard. But then when he brought in Sir Sean Spears, and then when FTR came in with Tully Blanchard, I'm looking at that group. I'm like, bro, you got a legend in the ring with you right now, and Tully Blanchard, who's probably in the ear of all those guys guiding them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you already had a great faction right there who could have gone on to do great things. But I think it's at that point where it gets that point where almost like what happened with Evolution in WWE, where each one of those guys were introduced and were told about who they are, what they represent in the industry of wrestling. But then all of a sudden it fell apart and everybody went their separate ways. Just because I think there was just so much talent in that group. I mean, and that group also had a generation, a guy in Ric Flair. I mean, Ric Flair was in that group, and at that point he was old as hell. He was still old as hell, but he was still that glue, the glue from the golden days of professional wrestling. You know, he was the nature boy, and he was the guide for those three guys. I mean, he was the mentor, kind of like Tully Blanchard being part of FTR with FTR and the Pinnacle. So you had those two the two old school wrestlers within a group, within a faction, possibly guiding those young wrestlers. But then, like you said, just it fizzled out. You know, it kind of happened with Evolution. You know, when Randy Orton started getting more hungry and became a world champion. You know, that kind of ended there. And then you kind of saw that with you kind of saw it with Wardlow. Once Wardlow, went face, you basically saw everybody else in Pinnacle kind of break away. As soon as he said, I'm no longer affiliated with the Pinnacle, you kind of saw where the Pinnacle kind of fizzled out. It was kind of thing with Evolution where once Randy left, they kind of fizzle out because then Batista kind of got out, and then Ric Flair and Triple H kind of fade out, and they all went their separate ways to Stardom, which is what you saw with the Pinnacle. MJF, the young kid who honestly was probably the youngest one in that group as the leader. You know, the young mind because he understands pro wrestling. But then you had the big brawn in Wardlow, who you looked at, you're like, holy crap, this guy's huge, and he could be a big star in AEW, and he is. Then you got someone like Sean Spears, who's a talented professional wrestler who, just like Chris Jericho, he could possibly change his persona almost every now and then. He goes from the perfect 10 in WWE, and he comes over here and he's the chairman of the board. He can change his character like a Chris Jericho. And then you got a talented, probably one of the best tag teams in the world in FTR. You pick these guys up. They have great history in independence, in WWE, and now and then Ring of Honor, and now AEW. You get all those groups, those guys together, and I honestly thought that faction was going to go further than it did. But I'm actually glad it kind of fizzled out, because now you're seeing the start of every single one of those guys in that group, especially the big two in MJF and Wardlow, but also in FTR, and hopefully, they get their long break that they need to spend time with their families. So like that, I'm not one of these fans who are like, oh, I want them back soon. I understand they got a life outside of pro wrestling, and they want a lighter schedule so they could be home with family, So I'm like, let them take their little break. Let them do independent shows. They don't have to big promotions. I'm planning on going to NWA this weekend. Maybe I'll see them there. I don't know. But then you look at someone like MJF. You saw the talent in MJF, and the fact that you put him as a leader of a faction. That speaks volume of a talent on a roster. When you're the promoter, or you're part of the creative process in that promotion, and you're like, you guys can be a faction, but as a leader, it's you. Like, and they look at you and said, "We have faith that you can be a leader of this faction," and that was then MJF, and that to me spoke volumes. I was like, "Holy crap!" MJF, one of the youngest guys on the roster, in charge of a faction of literally three generational guys and another up and coming performer in Wardlow. And so with that pinnacle, I honestly thought it was great. It was a great faction. And the fact that it was the play on words of MJF saying, "We are the pinnacle of professional wrestling." And I loved it.
That was probably that was probably one of the best things to do at the Pinnacle. And looking at it now, think about it, everyone, unfortunately except for Sean Spears, has held gold in that company. So you literally,
which I feel Sean Spears might, once he comes back. I honestly think he had a lot of momentum coming into the promotion too. I mean, his feud with Cody, and then his joint partnership with MJF, and then the creative of the Pinnacle, and just his characteristics, his ability, the fact. And then I don't know if a lot of people saw it, but when he came back for that match with, I believe it was FTR, it was him, FTR, and I can't remember who they went against, but it was in Canada. It was the show in Canada. When Dynamite went off the air, he cut a promo. And you saw the kind of guy that Sean Spears is. You're like, this guy comes back, he's going to be a great babyface. Like, you saw him cut a babyface promo. And I feel that's how you bring him back. Because right now I feel like you got a lot of heels on the roster, and you need another babyface. Maybe that babyface could be a Sean Spears.
Yeah. And looking at it now, that kind of leads into, Blood and Guts and the whole Jericho feud and the whole Labors of Jericho. I loved MJF pushing Jericho off of the the War Games type Blood and Guts cage. That was I know it's little sports entertainment just because he landed on a crash pad, but I'm okay with him landing on a crash pad, to be honest with you. And to watching that, and then what did you think about that Blood and Guts match? Like, do you think it lived up to its expectation? I thought it did, and then some. And then to have that,
I'd have to go back and rewatch it. But from what I can remember, it was a great, pretty much finish of the feud of the two factions. Because I believe that happened after the Stampede match, correct? The Stampede match
it was that too, and then.
So the Stampede match was really good, and honestly, you could have ended it there. But being a wrestling promotion, you got to go bigger and better, and so having that Blood and Guts match was the big payoff. And I think it ended the rivalry between the two groups very well. It kind of also gave the idea of the trajectory of where those groups were headed. Obviously, the Inner Circle had their issues and kind of broke away, and then you got introduced to the Jericho Appreciation Society with still keeping Jake Hager and Sammy Guevara on board. But then you lose Santino Ortiz. And then you look at something like the Pinnacle, where MJF and Sean Spears kind of stuck together, and then you had Wardlow there as the hunch guy, but then FTR was kind of in between because they loved Wardlow. They were the Wardlow guy. And then when Wardlow left, that kind of put a damper in the Pinnacle. Yet you got 3 out of the 5 members of Inner Circle now in a new group. Whereas now you got the Pinnacle completely scattered all over the place. But I think that Blood and Guts match, it had its moments. Like I said, I have to go back and watch it. I haven't watched it. I can't remember a lot of it. If I remember correctly, a chair with barbed wire was used, which was very entertaining. And then honestly, I think that was probably one of the best faction feuds in a while. As much as people like to talk about the Jericho Appreciation Society and Blackpool Combat Club, I honestly thought the Pinnacle and Inner Circle was probably one of the better faction feuds in professional wrestling.
Looking at it now, even like it's crazy to see how much of an impact working with Jericho had on MJF. I remember I was there for the trials of Jericho. I was there for one of the first moments with when Jericho went up against Shawn Spears, and then I was there the night that he beat MJF. MJF, cheated and they had to reverse the decision.
Yes.
And I remember like the crowd being crazy on both those times. Without MJF, we never would have got Nick Gage on an AEW program. And I remember being there when they announced Nick Gage, and this is right after he had his match with Matt Cardona. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna kill Jericho.
Yeah,
he's gonna destroy him.
Honestly, when he introduced Nick Gage and the idea of deathmatch coming to AEW, I think that was also a good call on Tony Khan introducing the crowd to a new style of wrestling. Because it gave me vibes of a death match happening in a promotion that usually doesn't do death matches. Mm-hmm. Kind of like when ECW invaded Raw in the early days and basically did all this extreme crap. And you don't see that on WWE,
Yeah.
But that, I think MJF also, again, that's just the brilliance of MJF. And I think it was a group effort, between MJF, Jericho, and Tony Khan saying, hey, with this storyline of the trials of Jericho, who can we bring in as opponents? And, that's also the legacy that Jericho has and the connections MJF has within professional wrestling. That's another relationship that I can compare to MJF and Cody, is MJF and Chris Jericho. Because here's another generational talent in Chris Jericho seeing something in a younger generational talent like MJF and giving him the keys and the car to be like, here, kid, this is yours now. This is you. Like, this is you setting on. And that feud happened literally right after the Cody and MJF feud.
Yeah.
That was literally the next feud for MJF after Cody was Chris Jericho. What was that feud? And a lot of people sort of remember and forget that in the early, earlier on in AEW's, existence. Because everybody wants to talk about the early days where it's like Cody and MJF, but a lot of people forget about the trials of Jericho fighting against MJF. And again, that's, I mean, that last match where you thought MJF had retired Chris Jericho. And then here comes Audrey saying, no, MJF cheated. And now, you had this character of MJF feeling, oh, dude, I'm getting screwed. Nobody likes me. Blah. Well, that's because you're a dick. But yes. But man, that feud with Chris Jericho it's kind of the same feud with MJF and Cody. Mm-hmm. You had that, someone who founded AEW guiding this young talent, and then a talent from decades of professional wrestling going, all right, I'll guide you too because I see something in you as well. So that's just the guidance of veterans within the industry guiding someone like MJF in the right direction.
And I think also looking at too, as we get ready to wind down here, I think you also saw some of the more, I guess, fun side of MJF. Two of my favorite MJF moments. You had the New York show tune Frank Sinatra style video of the Dinner Le Venaire where Jericho was talking about when they're trying to keep upping the game when they're just ordering steaks and the waitress just brings them 2 raw steaks. But one thing I liked about it, and a lot of people, this is a very interesting take I heard on What Culture Wrestling, was this was all in Jericho's mind. That's why he was still the star. But then at the end, you see him how he's all gassed after just a Broadway dance. MJF wants to do another verse. That was probably one of my favorite, I think, laughing moments with MJF. Do you recall the Dinner Le Venaire?
See, that was one of the things I can't remember of that I think I kind of forgot about. But I honestly think the week after I think the biggest laugh and the biggest mark out I got was, and I didn't realize it till later who it was, but when MJF came out on that little throne after beating Punk and CM Punk in Chicago and made out with that girl on the apron. And I go, God, this guy. I said, this guy is just making out with a random girl until I realized later that's his fiance.
And they played it off so well,
And
though,
they
with just a
played it
random
off
girl.
so well. I was like, I would not expect. I thought it was just a random girl MJF was going to make out with, and she had no idea he was going to do that. I thought it was all off the top of the head, where he got one girl kiss his cheek, and then he's like, and then he just makes out the other one. I'm like, dude, this is brilliant. But then finding out it's his fiance, and actually she paints too. She does paintings. She sells paintings.
Yep.
And she's really good too.
Did you see the Moxley painting she did? Because him
I did.
I did. Because her and MJF got in a fight.
Yeah, her and MJF got into a fight, which is funny because he's engaged to her, but he also is his character in front of her, which is great. Which is that was a funny moment for me for MJF, and then any videos I see of him at conventions just crack me up. So,
like I said, he's really making it very entertaining for the fans. And then, so as we start to wind down here, I'm going to ask you just a couple just give me a couple wrestlers. Ones that we haven't mentioned tonight. Who has also given MJF maybe a mini feud, a good mini feud, or just a great match in general, just out of the blue. Who for you has MJF gone against that you were like, dang, this match was great?
Wow, that's a good question. Because a lot of the feuds happened in factions. I feel a lot of his matches happened when he was part of factions, whether it was faction matches or just him versus another member of the faction. I mean, you could go on with him in Pinnacle against Inner Circle when he wrestled a bunch of guys there. I do believe, I don't know if he's had a match with him yet. I can't recall. There's been so many matches, but Jungle Boy comes to mind. Have they? I don't think they've had a match together. Have they?
I thought so. I remember.
I think that would be a great match. Now, whether it happens is still far from the telling of it. I mean, when they interviewed Jungle Boy that one night on Dynamite, and he says, "I respect Hook," he goes, "but I've done the tag team stuff. Now I want more." That gives me memories of Wardlow's first promo when he broke away from MJF in the Pinnacle, saying this is Wardlow's world and I'm taking it all. And
yeah,
that's what Jungle Boy reminded me of. It's like, dude, Jungle Boy could be in line to have a good feud with MJF because you got someone in Jungle Boy, Jack Perry, who's very young, very talented. It's got great ring work. Works well with a lot of people. And then you got someone like MJF. I think after this, I say you try to work your way with Jungle Boy against, you had Jungle Boy win the Revolution ladder match.
Yeah.
And then you got him next in line to get MJF after MJF beats Danielson, which I know a lot of people will say we'd love to see Danielson at least win the title. I just think right now the momentum's so good with MJF, you don't take the title off of him.
Yeah. Well, and back to your Jungle Boy. So they did go against each other in May of 2020. So it was
That's why I can remember. Yeah.
It was right during. It was either during. Was it? When did
it was during the pandemic.
Right during the pandemic. Yeah. So that's why a lot of. I think that's why a lot of people don't remember it. But like I said, you could plug him into a storyline easily with MJF. Another one that I would like to see revisited, since we're talking about it, would be Darby Allin.
Yeah, because their feud also happened a little bit after the pandemic, correct?
Yeah, they've had a couple different spats. That's the thing. They had I believe I know they had a match last year. I think it was Revolution because it opened. It was either Revolution or All Out.
I think it was All Out because it was right after there was the Dynamite where a limo pulled up and like a bunch of masked people attacked Darby Allin.
Yeah.
And they're all like, "Oh, it's the Pinnacle! It's the Pinnacle!" And then Darby Allin showed up in the crowd and attacked MJF. So I think their payoff match was at All Out.
Yeah, because I remember it just being one of the best, like, actually Matt worked matches that Darby Allin's had. It was very worked well. Also looking at too, you had that small little feud with Brian Pillman Jr. That was another very controversial moment in MJF's career, bringing up Brian Pillman and all the experiences
and Brian Pillman's mom.
Yeah, Brian Pillman's mom. Yeah. It was one of those ones that was like, dang, this is yes. Yeah, it was one of those things that was like, dang, this is that was just a really good small feud, and you got Brian Pillman some pretty decent TV time too, which I was really surprised about.
Yeah.
But you need that I think you need that controversial promo and that fire up baby face to help sell your New York show.
Right. I mean, and that's another thing is, like I said, we talk about these guys. I mean, we've already had the thing with Ricky Starks. I don't mind if they revisit that at some point. Jungle Boy would be great with the crowd now because of how over Jungle Boy Jack Perry is right now with the crowd. I think another person you bring back that you'd be like, oh, he's back, he's going to be his friend, is Shawn Spears.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to remember, Shawn Spears could be because, like I said, you don't have many baby faces right now to face MJF.
You don't.
So what would you get if you get the former best friend? It's kind of like the full circle of MJF and Cody, where you now got Spears comes back and is now feuding with MJF. I mean,
like I said, there's some pretty good baby faces that you could easily you could put on that could go up against MJF, or just create your babyface, like you said with Shawn Spears. There's story there, and you could easily tie in. I was so frustrated with the Pinnacle, and the Pinnacle we were supposed to be on the top, but I ended up being on the bottom and literally not wrestling for months. So, like I said, there's story there. So,
honestly, like I said, I think another good match and a good feud. Well, I mean, it's a group feud, but also a good match that MJF had was Wheeler Yuta, which is another surprising good match that he had.
That was another like great little like moment and little mini feud that you could easily, like I said, another one that you could revisit down the road. And this is just me throwing a match out here, but why don't you make it a Ring of Honor's Pure Rules match?
Yeah.
Yuta has that now Ring of Honor lineage with having that that Pure Rules belt. So that would be fun to see. You could do a champion versus champion match, or you could just do a Pure Rules match and say, hey, like if you're not, like I said, I want to risk it all, or like there's a lot of stories that they could tell.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for our MJF Spotlight for episode 10. I thought it was a really good episode. Actually, this is probably one of my favorite episodes we've recorded.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it, and I love the idea that, and I think you meant to say the second Thursday, right? Not Tuesday?
Yeah, sorry, second Thursday, yeah.
So I like the idea that the second Thursday of every month is a spotlight on a wrestler, so.
Yeah, like I said, I think it'll be fun to kind of talk about our different opinions and takes on, that said wrestler. For the next one, I'm going to put a poll up on our socials, or I'll have Connor do it, and we'll have a vote to see who we'll do for next month's spotlight.
Cool, I like that.
Yeah. Other than that, like I said, next week we'll be back, of course, same time, 7 Central. Next week we're gonna do a kind of a small list episode where we are going to try to predict the next 3 AEW World Champions.
Oh boy!
So I want to see if our lists are similar. So like I said, we'll do a fun little predictions list next week and discuss why we think what pick, and then we'll also be back tomorrow night for our Rampage watch along here at 9 Central. So if you guys want to come back and talk Rampage with us, we'll have a very fun watch along. Hopefully Connor will be back tomorrow. Unfortunately, he did have some technical issues due to circumstances out of his control. So don't be mad at Connor for missing tonight. It was, like I said, it wasn't his fault. He was all ready to go. We had a production messaging earlier, and we had everything lined up for tonight's episode. And unfortunately, right before we went on there, boom. So he'll be back on tomorrow. Other than that, that's good. Like I said, that's gonna do it for tonight's show. Make sure you guys hit the little bell button down below and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. Connor is hard at work right now on a couple previously recorded videos. We also have card breaks, vlogs about wrestling events, and a couple other things that are on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't had a chance, go check them out already. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at All Elite Zone 1, where we post our polls, we post upcoming shows and information about our special guest. We do have a guest coming up this Wednesday, so it's going to be awesome to sit down and interview one of Ring of Honor's one of their stars. I can't remember his name off the top of the head. Do you remember who we were interviewing Wednesday?
Oh, what's his name?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I forgot. I just.
Here, I'm going to our social now. Give me a second. I'm sorry. We'll end up here. Give me just a second here. It is. I'm so sorry. Like we've had a couple of reschedules on our guests, so
yeah,
a few of them are Ring of Honor. So
I mean, obviously, Lady Frost too is another one that's going to be rescheduled. Yep. So
there's Tony Deppen. We already had him on the show. Crap. We will have a guest on Wednesday. I do apologize, folks. Make sure you check our social media out for who we'll have on here Wednesday. Make sure you follow us on Spotify. We have some other shows and other recorded content on Spotify, Podbean, and we are just growing our podcasting, empire here. And share with your friends. That's gonna do it for tonight's episode. I want to say thank you to my wonderful colleague, friend, and my favorite tag team partner, Adam. Thank you so much for being part of the show again. It's always a pleasure to talk wrestling with you.
Lane, thank you for always having me on Talking League on Thursdays. This is, besides Dynamite Reaction, this is also my favorite thing to do right now is the Talking the Elite. So
yeah, like I said, it's always a pleasure. You'll have a lot of great insights and a lot of great history in that great big bald head of yours. So it's always a pleasure to have you. That's going to do it for tonight. We will see you guys tomorrow night for Rampage Watch Along, and we'll see you guys next week for Talking Elite.